My name is Kent. I am 78. I live in an old house on the edge of town, where the windows overlook not the street, but the wasteland. Once there were gardens, now there are weeds, concrete rubble and rotten fences. The view is like from my heart, once alive, strong, and now forgotten and abandoned. I wake up early. Not because I have things to do, they are long gone. It's just that my body is used to it. For 40 years I got up at 5:30, drank black coffee without sugar, read reports, planned the day. And now, I get up, make coffee, look out the window. I don't drink coffee, my liver aches. But habit is stronger. Once my house was full. Children ran, laughed, a woman sang in the kitchen. Today the silence here sounds louder than screams. The walls are silent, the floor creaks. And only the clock runs away like a traitor, not stopping, not looking back. I have 2 children. My son is Oleg, a successful lawyer. Cold, correct, like a knife blade. My daughter is Marta, a psychologist. She is very busy, opens the borders of the inner world to strangers. And when my world fell apart, they didn't even notice. The phone is silent. They call on holidays. Well, when they call, they record a voicemail, "Hello, Dad, happy holidays, love, kisses." I listen to that, love, on repeat when my soul is very dark. My grandchildren. They come once every few months. They sit on the phone. They ask if there is Wi-Fi. Once I said something, I asked them to hang the curtains. Sasha, the eldest, did not look up, "Hang them yourself." I silently got up and did it myself. They are not angry. They are just different. They do not see a person in me. For them, I am an old teenager with a Soviet past and unnecessary looks. They don't notice me. In the store, the saleswoman is talking to someone. She doesn't even look at me when I'm standing at the cash register. In the hospital, a young doctor, without even taking off his headphones, makes a diagnosis in 5 minutes. "You don't have long anyway, Grandpa." And I didn't ask for long. I asked with dignity. I read old books where people still talk to each other, where honor is not a meme. Sometimes I write. I have a notebook. There are short phrases. Dates. Names. But more on that later. I go to the post office, because it's the only place where they still ask for your last name. They don't ask, "How are you?" But at least they don't forget that I exist. Sometimes I go to the park. I sit on a bench. People walk past. Me. Past me. Always. I watch. I listen. I remember. Once I was important. My decisions changed destinies. I was respected, greeted by hands, asked for advice. Now, I am invisible. Invisibility is not a superpower. It is a sentence. But in this silence that has already become my flesh, something new is beginning to stir. Not anger. No. Anger is an emotion. And what is growing is silence that takes shape. Silence that sees. That hears. That remembers. I don't ask for sympathy. I don't ask to be loved. But every indifferent back, every faded look, every contemptuous grandfather, is a brick. I will build something from them. I don't know yet what exactly. But it will be mine. And they will find out. Because old age is not the end. It is simply the calm before the storm. I wasn't always a shadow. I was once a storm. When I was 20, I had nothing but hunger, rage, and a thirst for the real thing. I grew up in a world where everything was measured by survival, not dreams. I learned to breathe through concrete. In the 80s, I started my first business, a tiny spare parts warehouse. I didn't steal, I didn't lie, I just traded faster, more accurately, smarter than others. And I wasn't afraid to take risks. I was hungry to win. And you know, that hunger never goes away. It just changes form. I worked 20 hours a day. Warehouses, cars, offices. I built a system from scratch, with my hands, my brain, my conscience. And people reached out. I was an authority. They listened to my word. Not because they were afraid, but because I didn't betray. Never. I remember carrying Maria in my arms through the rain to the hospital. She was pregnant with Marta at the time. I remember when we were assembling our first bicycle from scrap metal with Oleg, and he said then, "Dad, you're a magician. You can't buy such words. You have to earn them." Maria. She died 15 years ago. Cancer. She was the sun in my system. And when the sun disappears, even the shadows become meaningless. I held on. I didn't drink. I didn't fall. Because of the children. Because of the company. Because of duty. But since then I haven't lived. I simply existed in the next tasks, meetings, reports. But inside, something has died. And the children. They grew up in abundance. They had everything. I remember how I refused surgery so that Marta could study in London. She didn't even say, "Thank you," then. But I didn't demand it. Love is not bargaining. Oleg grew up sharp. Correct. But the older he got, the colder he became towards me. As if he was ashamed of my roots. He would say, "Dad, the world has changed, your methods are a thing of the past." And I thought, it's a good thing that they are a thing of the past. Because you don't even know how much dirt I trampled on so that you could walk clean. At a certain point, I gave them everything. The business to Oleg. The house to Marta. Even the garage with my old Zaporozhets to my grandchildren. And I left only one room in this house for myself. They didn't ask. I suggested it myself. Because I believed, family is above all. And then it began. No, not right away. First, silence. Then, contempt. Petty. Quiet. Destructive. Marta began to talk to me as to a child. "Dad, don't interfere, it's none of your business, we know ourselves." Oleg stopped answering calls. And the grandchildren, their indifference is a reflection of their parents. They are not evil. They are blind. For them, I am an old chair that prevents them from putting on a set-top box. And what is most painful is that they do not remember. Not my sleepless nights. Not my refusals from dreams. Not how I stood in the cold in line for medicine because Marta's had a fever. Nothing. Their childhood was simply okay for them. And for me, it was years of battle. I still keep my old notebooks. There are drawings, notes, projects, losses. All the ups and downs. I was not perfect. But I was. And I gave everything I had. And I got silence. And a wall. My past is my temple. But when you enter your temple and there is no one there, you begin to hear only your own breathing. And with it, thoughts. Dark ones. Touched. Sharp. I used to lift people up. Now, at least someone would give me a hand. Not as a favor. But as a recognition, you were. You are. You are worthy. But no one gives. And I begin to remember. Not only the good. But also what was feared in me. What I once locked away deep under lock and key. But now I see, the key is in my hands. And, perhaps, it is time to use it. They say old age comes quietly. No. A lie. It comes like a blade, cold and slow. First, a light breath on the back of your neck. Then, a subtle pain in your joints, in your throat, in your soul. And then, blows that don't hurt your skin, but cripple something much deeper. I remember the first real blow. The one that wasn't about your body, about your dignity. It was an ordinary morning. I took my cane, put on my coat, which had long since lost its heaviness and authority, and went to the doctor. The line was long. People were making noise, laughing. I stood there, restrained, accustomed. I waited. I always endured, because I understood that patience builds character. And then, when my turn finally came, the nurse looked in my direction, sighed, and said, "Grandpa, you have an appointment for yesterday. You'll come another time." I looked at the paper. It clearly said today. But she didn't look, she didn't care. I tried to explain, but the doctor, who had overheard our conversation, said through his teeth, "Time goes by quickly. Old age does too. Don't wait in line." And people laughed. Not all of them, but enough for me to feel something inside collapsing. That laughter wasn't loud. But it left behind ashes in my mouth and a coldness in my chest. When I got home, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, holding an empty cup in my hands. Outside was silence. Inside was a hum. And I opened that notebook for the first time. I wrote, Dr. 1240, superiority. Laughter. Not with any thought of revenge. No. Back then, it was just fixation. Memory is a weapon. It sharpens with age. The next blow came in the form of a family dinner. They all came, children, grandchildren. But not to me. Just like that, because this was their home now. I sat in the corner, as if I were an outsider. Oleg talked about deals, finances. Marta, about awareness and healthy boundaries. My boundaries were torn down a long time ago, but who cares? I tried to insert a word, to tell something about the new book I had read. But they didn't even stop. The grandchildren laughed at the memes, showed something to each other. And then, Sasha, the eldest, frowned, "Grandpa, could you keep quiet? We are discussing something important here." I didn't make any noise. I was just breathing. But they couldn't hear me anymore. Only a shadow that accidentally made a sound. I went out into the yard. It was cold outside, blowing in my face. But this cold seemed warmer than what was in the house. I sat down on a bench. I looked at my hands, burdened by the years I had lived, not broken, but no longer strong as they once were. And I wrote in my notebook again, family. Invisibility. Loss of voice. And then, the store. I bought bread, milk, some sausage, little things. The saleswoman didn't even look in my direction. She threw the change on the table, not into my hands. The coins rolled out. I picked them up slowly. The people behind sighed. One guy grumbled, "They might as well not get confused here during rush hour." And there, a new entry in the notebook. And so, day after day, case after case, with small cuts, they cleaned me up. Not intentionally. Simply, with indifference. It kills the cleanest. Because it leaves no traces. Only emptiness. And I kept a diary. Not for hatred. For memory. Because when everything is forgotten, a person ceases to be a person. I wrote names. Dates. Looks. Short phrases. Like an accountant that keeps track of pain. I didn't dream of revenge. Back then, no. I was simply afraid of disappearing. Of being swallowed by silence. Of disappearing without even leaving a shadow. But you know what's scarier than contempt? That which you eventually get used to. And then small deaths become the norm. Until the day when one shot of laughter in the faces of strangers triggers a mechanism in me that has long rusted away, but not died. The last line of the entry from that period looked like this: "They think I'm weak. Maybe. But I still remember how to be strong." This day promised nothing. No threat. No hope. Like all the days of recent years, it was gray, the consistency of which cuts the eyes harder than any storm. I went into the city. It was cold, but I decided to buy some groceries, a tradition that keeps me moving. My cane tapped on the asphalt like a metronome. Every step was a blow to the void. There were many people, students, noise, laughter, the smell of coffee. Life was in full swing. I walked through the crowd like a river stone that the water no longer notices. At the bus stop, the packages slipped out of my hands. An unfortunate move, my fingers don't hold them as well as they used to. The groceries rolled across the asphalt, apples rolled like escaped memories, bread fell into a puddle, a can of yogurt broke. And I just stood there. Looking down. Like a soldier who dropped his flag. I tried to bend over, but my whole body gave out. The cane slipped and fell next to the still trembling jar. I whispered, almost not believing my own voice, "Help me." A guy, about 20, glanced over. His face was impudent, self-confident, young. He smiled crookedly. "Grandpa, why are you here?" We still needed Grandma's scene. We should have stayed home. His friends laughed. Not loudly. Not maliciously. Just lightly. With human indifferent cruelty. Passers-by passed by. Someone even said, "Don't be dramatic. There are services for people like you. People like you." Dirty words. As if I had been put in a trash catalog. I felt something crunch inside. Not a bone. Consciousness. The world around me slowed down. The laughter stretched like rubber. The sound trembled in the air like a siren. I raised my head and looked at them. And at everyone around me. They didn't see the person. They saw the statistics, the background, the noise. And suddenly everything I was holding, everything I had endured, all those days of silence, closed into a point. And from that point rose something dark, old, but infinitely familiar. It didn't scream. It breathed evenly. Clearly. Calmly. Like a cold mind before a precise blow. I lifted the package, alone. Slowly, methodically, like a soldier rising after his first deadly lesson. People weren't laughing anymore. They just walked away. Not out of pity. Out of instinct. I didn't feel anger. Anger is weakness. No. I felt a return. I walked home differently. My pace became slow but confident. At home, I threw off my coat, put down my cane. I sat down at the table. I opened my notebook. And instead of a short line, I wrote, "Today the world made a mistake. They gave me up without a fight. And I'm not one to die quietly." My hand didn't tremble. My heart did, but not from pain. From awakening. There was no longer silence in the house. It was as if the walls had moved, making room for someone new, the old me. The one who once tore apart markets, broke down barriers, and wasn't afraid of the dark, because I myself was the dark for those who betrayed. I didn't dream of blood. I was never an executioner. But the truth is a more precise tool than a knife. And memory is heavier than any hammer. I wiped my pen. I closed my notebook. Now it's a game. Not revenge with a shout. Not senseless aggression. A cold, calculated, methodical display of strength. They thought that weakness was born of old age. But sometimes something else is born from old age, judgment. Cold. Invisible. Inevitable. He who survives the storm does not fear the rain. And I am no longer a victim. It all started with a call. Not loud, not demonstrative, quiet, from my old push-button phone. I knew what number to dial. My fingers found the right sequence themselves. There was no immediate answer on the other end. Then, low breathing, like a familiar shadow from the past. Kent? Yes. I'm back in the ranks. He didn't ask for reasons. Old wolves don't need explanations. We went through the 90s together, building businesses on ruins, where only those with a steel spine survived. He understood everything. We agreed. Contacts that had once been dormant began to move. I didn't intend to destroy lives physically. No. That would be too loud. I wanted to do something different, to make everyone see their essence. And then, not look away. I started with Martha. The daughter who considered herself the master of human souls. I knew her weakness, reputation. Her consultations, webinars, the image of an educated guardian of mental health. And I had access to the truth. To slides that weren't hers. To client lists that she asked me to not disclose, 10 years ago when I paid for her first website. A few weeks later, she began to be anonymously accused of ethical violations. The evidence was sophisticated, carefully collected. No one knew where it came from. She panicked. She called Oleg. A fight. I listened to the recording from the recorder that I had left in the kitchen. "How can you not help me? I'm your sister," she shouted. "You did everything yourself." "I won't drag you when you're drowning," he replied. A split. I wrote in a notebook: 1. Divide. 2. Weaken. 3. Open, don't break. Next was my grandson, Sasha. The same one who once told me to keep quiet. I created an anonymous profile online, found his circle of friends. A little manipulation, a fake offer for his startup, an investor with a too-good-to-be-true offer. He believed it. He sent the documents without checking. His idea was stolen. Another startup launched an almost identical platform a month later. Sasha was devastated. I wasn't happy. But I wrote down, pride is weaker than pain. Now he knows what it's like to be unnoticed. Oleg was the toughest. But I knew how to shake him. His reputation as a lawyer is clean. But there was one case, an old, dark one, from the early 2000s, when I covered him. Then I made the investigator silent. Now, I made him talk. Not for the public. For Oleg. A letter, anonymously. A photo. A note. And a short caption: everything has its price. Time to pay. Oleg became restless. He started looking for who was behind it. Communication with Marta came to naught. Sasha became withdrawn. There was discord in the family. They no longer came together. And I sat in my chair and drank tea, listening to the surrounding emptiness begin to sound differently. Not as loneliness. But as control. I did not act out of hatred. Every step I took was a reminder. They lost touch not with me, but with themselves. And then, acquaintances. Neighbors, the saleswoman, the doctor. Everyone has their own mirror. The saleswoman received a complaint from the veteran service because carelessly serves the elderly. She cried, asked forgiveness from all the old people. The doctor was checked, based on an anonymous report, insulting elderly patients. He was fired. They didn't thank me. And that's fine. I didn't want that. I just wanted those who thought that old age was the end to understand: sometimes it's the beginning. The beginning of a reckoning. The beginning of a vision. The beginning of a new order, where you don't have to be feared, but you definitely can't be despised. They didn't applaud. And that's a good thing. I wasn't looking for applause, I never had. I wanted one thing: to stop being considered an unnecessary noise in their lives. To make them see me as a person again, not as background. Now they do. And not because of my voice, because of the consequences. When everything had quieted down, I sat on my old bench by the window and watched a feeling of tired contentment take hold. It wasn't joy. It wasn't pain either, rather a complex mixture of relief, silent justice, and the weariness of someone who had long carried other people's lives on their shoulders. The children were fighting. They were throwing things at each other that they had once held in their hands as symbols of wealth, contracts, car keys, certificates. They weren't just screaming at each other, they were screaming at the imprint of their own consciousness, at the emptiness they had created by isolating themselves from the past, which had always remained true. The grandchildren cried, but their tears were more of shame than remorse. They had to lose the imaginary supports to face their own fragility. When the first calls came, I didn't answer right away. I gave them time, as I had once given myself, time to feel. And they felt it. This was my last lesson: manipulation, not to destroy, but to show the mirror. And the mirror moved. People on the streets looked at me and no longer passed by. The saleswoman did not hide her eyes when she handed over the check, she looked and said, "Thank you." The doctor who had once thrown out phrases received a lengthy explanation, a question and, ultimately, a silence. His career was shaken not because of my revenge, but because of his own bad decisions, but I gave the push that made the system speak. Most of them did not understand where the storm came from. They felt only its consequences, and that was enough. I did not feel triumph. It is not triumph when you see people you once loved in a fatal turn. It is rather a quiet, cold victory of reason over powerless oblivion. I teach a lesson to those who believe that old age is the end, that the right to dignity is not something to be asked for. It is due just as a voice is due. Did I regret it? Sometimes, at night, when memory brought back Maria's face, I felt a needle of guilt. I remembered another life, where my strength was a means of building, not of exposing. But memory is not only a burden, it is also a tool. I used it to restore balance to the world that had turned away from me. And was my action cruel? Yes. But sometimes it is hardness that creates clarity where softness only creates another oblivion. I saw something like understanding flash in the eyes of my daughter and son. It wasn't repentance, it was something much deeper. It was fear of the truth that their self-sufficiency had been held up by the services of other people's shadows. They had discovered that their independence was shaky. And that feeling was the best guide for the upcoming elections. I didn't want death or destruction. I wanted them to feel the loss. To feel it the way I had felt it for years, drop by drop, in every day, in every little thing that life brought them. So I let them lose what they thought was eternal, confidence in their own steadfastness. Every cry, every tear is nothing more than the beginning of a new course, a course of compassion, or another cycle of indifference. They will make the choice now consciously. And me? I return to my things. Home, where the wood of the table remembers my hands, where every scratch has its own story. I looked at my notebook, at those chilled notes that were once just a repository of pain, and now have become a catalyst. I rolled it up and put it in a drawer. Not because I forgot, on the contrary. So that the memory would be there, but not burn every night. And what next? Life. A small garden, to which I am slowly returning, coffee in the morning, the occasional call from my grandchildren, already with a different tone. They are still learning. They may never fully understand me, but now they know that I exist. This is the first victory. When the human bottom touches the conscience, even the thinnest crack can become a channel for light. I learned not to forgive and not to break. My upbringing and my experience taught me precision, how to make people see themselves without embellishment. Sometimes a lesson is an order without explanation. Sometimes it is simply a mirror that shatters myths. My revenge was a lesson. An instrument for rethinking. And there is a kind of bitter but fair beauty in this. As evening fell on my window, I felt that my strength had returned not from the outside, but from the inside. The strength of age is not the body, not money, not fame. It is concentration. It is memory that becomes the judge and the one who can change the course of events without entering the center of the stage. It is the wisdom of cold calculation and dignity that no one has the right to take away. I did not seek either fame or justification. I wanted dignity. And now no one will smile at me as if I were nothing. The world has seen my presence, and however fragile the outcome may be, it is real. And that, it turns out, is enough. Maybe, somewhere, those I have touched will have the will to change. Maybe not. The world is a complex machine, and I am just a small lever in it. But sometimes even a small lever can move a big beam. I did. Sometimes it's just a mirror that shatters myths. My revenge was a lesson. A tool for rethinking. And there's a bitter but just beauty in that. As evening fell on my window, I felt my strength return not from the outside, but from the inside. The strength of age is not the body, not money, not fame. It's concentration. It's memory that becomes the judge and the one who can change the course of events without entering center stage. It's the wisdom of cold calculation and the dignity that no one has the right to take away. I sought neither fame nor justification. I wanted dignity. And now no one will smile in my direction as if I were nothing. The world has seen my presence, and however fragile this outcome may be, it is real. And that, it turned out, is enough. Maybe, somewhere, those I touched will have a desire to change. Maybe not. The world is a complex machine, and I am just a small lever in it. But sometimes even a small lever can move a big beam. I did. Sometimes it's just a mirror that shatters myths. My revenge was a lesson. A tool for rethinking. And there's a bitter but just beauty in that. As evening fell on my window, I felt my strength return not from the outside, but from the inside. The strength of age is not the body, not money, not fame. It's concentration. It's memory that becomes the judge and the one who can change the course of events without entering center stage. It's the wisdom of cold calculation and the dignity that no one has the right to take away. I sought neither fame nor justification. I wanted dignity. And now no one will smile in my direction as if I were nothing. The world has seen my presence, and however fragile this outcome may be, it is real. And that, it turned out, is enough. Maybe, somewhere, those I touched will have a desire to change. Maybe not. The world is a complex machine, and I am just a small lever in it. But sometimes even a small lever can move a big beam. I did. As night fell over the town, I turned off the lights in my room, lay down in my bed, and for the first time in a long time fell asleep without feeling as if I had been swallowed up. It was not a deafening victory, it was the quiet, solid conclusion of a man's life who had found a way to regain his voice. And that voice was not a scream. It was a monotonous, soft unit of truth that would no longer allow me to be ignored. I am Kent. I have been forgotten. I have become a shadow. I have returned as a judge. And now, when they look at me, their eyes no longer flicker with contempt. There is something new there, anxiety, respect, sometimes shame. This is the beginning. And I will stop there. For my revenge was not the end, it was a lesson. And the most important lesson of old age is to demand dignity without losing humanity. Subscribe and like. And tell your friends about this video.